Good evening and welcome back to the International Space Station Flight Control Room at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, where at this hour, the journey of Kevin Ford of NASA and Russian cosmonauts Oleg Novitsky and Evgeny Tarelkin is in the final act, as they are prepared for a deorbit burn just 27.5 minutes from now in their Soyuz TMA-06M spacecraft that will begin the journey home to wrap up 144 days in space, 142 days aboard the International Space Station, and a journey of almost 61 million miles spanning 2,304 orbits of the Earth. Everything is in readiness for the homecoming of Ford, Novitsky, and Tarelkin as the Soyuz, now almost 12 kilometers away from the International Space Station from which it undocked 2 hours ago at 6:43 p.m. Central Time. The Soyuz has moved into a position for the 4-minute, 44-second retrograde firing of the Soyuz engines that will begin a 53-minute journey home and a landing on a frigid steppe of Kazakhstan, 36 miles to the northeast of the remote town of Arkalyk. Some 5 hours ago at 3:38 p.m. Central Time, the departing Expedition 34 crew and the remaining Expedition 35 crew members had an opportunity to say farewell to one another in the small passageway linking the Soyuz TMA-06M spacecraft with the Poisk module on the space-facing side of the Zvezda service module on the Russian segment of the International Space Station. As the crew members said goodbye to one another, it set the stage for the closing of the hatches and the beginning of the journey home for Ford, Novitsky, and Tarelkin, who were launched back on October 23rd last year from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan, arriving on board the International Space Station on October 25th. As you can see in this replay of the video from 5 hours ago, the departing crew made its way into the hatchway to the orbital module, the upper portion of the 3-section Soyuz spacecraft, after which they had an opportunity to say a few final words to one another before closing the hatch and beginning the process of leak checks that resulted in an airtight seal and the depressurization of the vestibule, the small passageway that you're seeing between the Soyuz and Poisk, before they donned their Sokol launch and entry suits, conducted leak checks of those suits in the precursor to the actual undocking that took place a couple of hours later. Once again, you're seeing the final farewells as Oleg Novitsky, you can see in the hatchway the Soyuz commander wiping down the hatchway to make sure that no debris would interfere with the closing of the hatches and the leak checks that would ensue. The crew members saying final farewells to one another. The Expedition 35 crew on the space station side of the docking interface now left as a 3-man crew with Expedition 35 Commander Chris Hadfield of the Canadian Space Agency, his NASA flight engineer crewmate Tom Marshburn, and Russian cosmonaut Roman Romanenko, who will be a 3-man crew for the next 2 weeks until the launch of Pavel Vinogradov, Chris Cassidy, and Alexander Mazurkin in the wee hours of March 29th, 2 weeks from today, as they begin their journey to the International Space Station on a single-day launch to docking expedited fast track of 4 orbits in 6 hours from launch to docking. They will join up with Hadfield, Romanenko, and Marshburn to re-up to a 6-man crew on board the International Outpost and Expedition 35. Again, this is video that was captured at 3:38 p.m. Central Time this afternoon, about 5 hours ago, as the crew members said farewell to one another before closing the hatches between the Soyuz TMA-06M spacecraft and the Poisk module to begin the preparations for undocking. Romanenko on the left in the red shirt, and Chris Hadfield snapping final photos of his crewmates before the closing of the hatch that you'll see just a moment from now. As you watch this replay, we now are hearing that the sun is rising at the landing site. It is dawn at the landing site on the steppe of Kazakhstan. And we'll talk about the helicopter deployments for the search and recovery forces in just a moment. But the sun is beginning to rise at the landing site. It is extremely cold. The temperature is hovering just over 0 degrees Fahrenheit at this hour. The sunrise and the sun expected to warm the landing site by a few degrees, but it is going to be very, very frigid conditions for Ford Novitzky and Tarelkin at landing. Now you see the hatches being closed and secured on the station side of the docking interface. A similar hatch closure took place on the Soyuz side of the docking interface, and the commencement of leak checks to ensure that we had an airtight seal between the two docking interfaces prior to undocking. With all of those leak checks having been accomplished and the crew having climbed into their Sokol launch and entry suits, the command was given at 6:40 p.m. Central Time to begin hooks unlatching from the docking interface on the Poisk module, and at 6:43 p.m. springs on both sides of the docking interface pushed off against one another to enable physical separation of the Soyuz from the Poisk module docking port to which it had been attached since October 25th. 3 minutes after physical separation, 2 thrusters on the Soyuz fired for 15 seconds and a separation burn that enabled the Soyuz to begin to phase away from the station to the point at which it is now about 12 kilometers away for the deorbit burn that is scheduled 20 minutes and 30 seconds from now. And again, this video from an external camera on the Soyuz vehicle as it departed the International Space Station that had been the home for Ford Novitzky and Tarelkin for 142 days. Again, that was video of the undocking from an external television camera on the Soyuz as the TMA-06M and its 3 passengers, Ford, Novitzky, and Tarelkin, flying under the call sign of Kazbek that you'll hear referenced very frequently during the VHF audio conversations between Russian flight controllers at the Russian Mission Control Center in Korolyov outside Moscow and the crew as they descend for their landing over the course of the next hour and 12 minutes. Kazbek, the name of one of the major mountains of the Caucasus, that mountain range located between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea, that call sign selected by Soyuz Commander Oleg Novitzky. Down at the landing site in Kazakhstan, as we mentioned, the sun beginning to rise. That should warm the landing site temperatures just a bit. However, the current forecast calls for very clear skies. You can see this radar imagery, the circle representing the landing target for the Soyuz TMA-06M spacecraft and its 3 crew members, Ford, Novitzky, and Tarelkin, with landing scheduled just 1 hour, 11 minutes from now. The fog and freezing rain that delayed landing by 24 hours passed to the east of the landing site overnight, enabling helicopters to deploy from the prime staging city of Kustanai, Kazakhstan, just across the border from Russia, that you can see here in this landing map. They flew in the wee hours Friday morning U.S. time from Kustanai down to Arkelik and further to the west to pre-stage at a ballistic landing site that would be employed in the highly unlikely event that a problem with the Soyuz vehicle during entry would cause it to fall short, well short of its intended landing target. That landing target in the bullseye that you see is about 36 miles to the northeast of Arkelik. And at this hour, other helicopters, the final quartet of helicopters deploying from Kustanai, are airborne. Their departure back-timed so that they arrive in the vicinity of the landing site right around the time the Soyuz will arrive as well under its main parachute. Other helicopters are expected to deploy in the next 25 minutes or so from Arkelik itself, where they have spent their crew members and members of the landing team have spent the night. Those helicopters will be airborne in about 25 minutes for a 30-minute flight, a much shorter flight to the prime landing site. The bottom line is that 8 out of the 12 helicopters associated with tonight's recovery operations will converge around the vicinity of the landing site to the northeast of Arkelik at the time that the Soyuz is within view under its main chute. Just a few minutes before its landing, those helicopters will be circling around the landing zone in an oval-shaped racetrack pattern as they wait for the arrival of the Soyuz under its main chute. 2 other helicopters, Russian Mi-8 helicopters, are being dispatched midway between the prime landing site and the ballistic landing zone so that they may fly in either direction depending on the disposition of the Soyuz's entry track, which moves from southwest to northeast toward the prime landing site itself. And the final 2 helicopters in this choreographed scenario tonight are to the far west at the western edge of the ballistic landing zone in the unlikely event, as we said, that they would come into play for tonight's recovery operations. In addition to the dozen helicopters in play, there are 3 fixed-wing aircraft, including a large Antonov 24 aircraft that you see in this picture in the upper right-hand corner. That Antonov aircraft serves as a flying command and relay center, if you will, that the Russian search and recovery forces known as Rosaviatsia use to relay data and communications from the Soyuz crew when they approach the landing site itself. All of that data and communications relayed back to the Russian flight control team at the Russian Mission Control Center in Korolyov outside Moscow. You're looking at a live view from a balcony camera overlooking the International Space Station flight control room in Korolyov. In addition, there are a half-dozen all-terrain vehicles poised at the landing site itself, which will move into proximity of the capsule to begin the process of providing imagery from the landing site. We hope for live video of the crew being extracted from the Soyuz once it has landed and it is safe to approach the vehicle itself. The crew will be extracted one by one from the Soyuz vehicle. The commander, Novitsky, is extracted first, followed by, we think, in the order that it usually goes in, by Yevgeny Tarelkin from the left seat, and finally Kevin Ford from the right seat of the descent module itself. Those all-terrain vehicles will be standing by as the 3 crew members are placed in reclining chairs and bundled up against the extreme cold at the landing site itself tonight, which is Saturday morning Kazakhstan time. One by one, the crew members will be raised in those reclining chairs and brought into an inflatable medical tent nearby that will be erected by RSC and Nergia personnel who are working in conjunction with the search and recovery forces this evening. They will be brought into that inflatable medical tent, which is heated so that they can get out of those bulky Sokol launch and entry suits and into more comfortable flight clothing. They'll be administered to initial medical exams by a team of flight surgeons on hand, representing each of the 3 crew members, including a NASA team of flight surgeons accompanying the NASA delegation, along with the search and recovery forces participating in tonight's recovery operations. Once the crew is deemed fit and ready to fly back to the staging city of Kustanai. They'll be brought one by one into all-terrain vehicles that will drive them a short distance to 3 individual helicopters that will take off for the 2-hour flight back to the staging city of Kustanai, Kazakhstan. In Kustanai, Kevin Ford will say goodbye for the time being to his 2 Russian colleagues, Novitsky and Tarelkin. He will board a NASA plane for the flight back to Houston. Novitsky and Tarelkin will board a Gagarin Cosmonaut Training Center plane for the flight back to Chkalovsky Airfield, a military air base just outside of their training base at Star City, Russia. The International Space Station and the Soyuz TMA-06M are currently flying across the South Pacific at an altitude of 254 statute miles, soon to cross the southern tip of Chile and southern Argentina, back across the southern Atlantic Ocean, where the 2 vehicles will begin a southwest to northeasterly traverse across the southern Atlantic and across the equator. Again, we are just 12 minutes away from the deorbit burn, 1 hour, 5 minutes away from the landing of the Soyuz on the steppe of Kazakhstan. Right now, the forecast for landing time is for nearly pristine conditions cloud-wise. Only a few clouds at 1,000 feet are expected, and again, you're looking at this radar imagery. There are some clouds to the south and to the southeast of the landing site in Kazakhstan, but right at that bullseye target that the Soyuz hopes to make it down to, there are perfectly clear skies here, and we're just about 20 minutes after sunrise now as the sun is rising at the landing site. We're expecting light winds about 7 miles an hour out of the southeast, extremely cold temperatures that will be greeting the crew, temperatures in the low teens at best, with a wind chill factor around 0 degrees Fahrenheit. The deorbit burn that is to be executed less than 11 minutes from now is a 4-minute, 44-second braking maneuver, a retrograde maneuver, if you will, to decelerate the orbit of the Soyuz by 128 meters per second, enabling it to drop out of orbit to begin the descent back toward the Earth's atmosphere. The 3 sections of the Soyuz will pyrotechnically separate at 9:39 p.m. Central Time. Only the descent module survives the reentry. It will reach the upper traces of the Earth's atmosphere at 9:42 p.m., heading for the landing site. The command to open up the parachutes will be given at 9:51 p.m. First, a drogue chute will be deployed, followed by the deployment of the main chute of the Soyuz, which will be canted at an angle once the main chute is deployed. The Soyuz then will be heading for the landing site just a few seconds before touchdown. Soft landing engines will initiate a firing for a final braking maneuver, with touchdown expected at 10:05 p.m. Central Time, 9:05 a.m. Kazakhstan time on Saturday morning, about an hour and 23 minutes after sunrise. About 40 minutes ago, on the communications loops up to the Soyuz vehicle following undocking, the head of the Gagarin Cosmonaut Training Center, veteran cosmonaut Sergei Grikolov, who has spent more time in space than any other human being, voiced up his best wishes to Novitsky, Tarelkin, and Ford, saying, have a good ride home. We'll see you back in Moscow. Ford, Nowitzki, and Tarelkin flying their Soyuz under the call sign of Kazbek, chosen by Nowitzki, the Soyuz commander, who is strapped into the center seat of the descent module in the center section of the three-section Soyuz spacecraft, flanked on his left by board engineer Tarelkin and on his right by Kevin Ford, the Expedition 34 commander, who handed over command of the International Space Station on Wednesday to Canadian Space Agency astronaut Chris Hadfield, Hadfield becoming the first Canadian commander of the International Laboratory. At the time of undocking, Expedition 35 began officially. The increments measured from undocking to undocking in the space station bylaws. The International Space Station and the Soyuz now approaching the southern coast of Chile, about to cross Chile into Argentina and back out over the South Atlantic.
Fan off. Indicator on.
Moscow SSG1 for Roman. Moscow SSG1. Page 13, inaudible. MLK 0.
We're now 6.5 minutes away from the start of the deorbit burn. Again, a 4-minute, 44-second braking maneuver, the firing of the Soyuz engines to begin to slow the orbital speed of the Soyuz down and enabling Earth's gravity to capture the vehicle as it drops out of the Earth's atmosphere.
Go ahead, Roman. I didn't code you, but there is an MLK mishap and inaudible. Come again. Step 7-3. Step 7-3. I need to report every minute the state of Aru. I'm reporting inaudible. Copy.
Here in the International Space Station Flight Control Room at Mission Control in Houston, the Orbit 3 team of flight controllers on duty working in tandem with their Russian counterparts at their control center outside of Moscow. The Orbit 3 team here in Houston, led by Flight Director Mike Sarafin at this hour, joined on console to Sarafin's right in the blue shirt. That's spacecraft communicator Rob Hayhurst, who's talking directly with the space station crew of Hatfield, Romanenko, and Tom Marshburn. And to Hayhurst's right is Japanese astronaut Satoshi Furukawa, a veteran of half a year on the International Space Station, who is here to provide his expertise on Soyuz systems if required.
We are expecting a detailed report.
Members of Kevin Ford's family are here in the viewing room in the ISS Flight Control Room here at the Johnson Space Center, as they will watch, along with the rest of us, all of the activities involved with the return of Ford and his crewmates to a landing on a frigid steppe of Kazakhstan just 57 minutes from now. We're 4 minutes away from the deorbit burn that will start the journey home for Ford, Nowitzki, and Tarelkin. This crew wrapping up 144 days in space since their launch back on October 23rd.
Moscow, SSG1 for Roman.
Baron.
Yes, Roman, go ahead. As per the radiogram, it's step 7-3. I should report the status inaudible every minute. Give you the percentage and the MLK failures as well. There are zeros. That's why I'm not going to bother you every minute. If there are any changes or deviations, I'm going to let you know. Otherwise, so far, everything is nominal, so I'm not going to report you every minute because that would make no sense. It would be just garbage. All right, very good. Now you have zeros. As soon as anything changes, let us know. Yes, everything is stable now. There are zeros, and as soon as there is a malfunction, I'm going to let you know.
Now 3 minutes away from the deorbit burn, the International Space Station and the Soyuz TMA-06M spacecraft tracking from southwest to northeast across the southwestern Atlantic Ocean.
And there are 0 errors, so I'm going to go ahead and proceed. All right, we copy.
Flight controllers at the Russian Mission Control Center in Korolyov exhorting the Soyuz crew to keep them informed, keep talking, keep providing status reports. We mentioned this in our previous broadcast, but it's worth repeating that because of the altitude of the International Space Station, 254 statute miles, and the so-called look angle of the Soyuz antennas to the S-band communication system of the station itself during the Soyuz's return to Earth, there is enough distance between the Soyuz and the station as it plunges back into the Earth's atmosphere that communications could be choppy or non-existent from time to time during the time that the Soyuz enters the Earth's atmosphere prior to the time that it is acquired by that Antonov fixed-wing aircraft that is a flying command and relay station, if you will, near the landing site to the northeast of Arkalyk, Kazakhstan. Coming up on the 90-second mark to the start of the deorbit burn. And this unique view of the Soyuz TMA-06M from International Space Station cameras. 1 minute till the deorbit burn.
Interference.
"15 seconds until the deorbit burn. All quiet here in the flight control room. The visiting vehicle officer reports that the deorbit burn is underway.
Kazbek Mission Control Moscow.
Once again, a 4-minute, 44-second retrograde firing of the Soyuz engines to slow the vehicle down, enabling it to drop out of orbit for its descent back into the Earth's atmosphere.
Kazbek, Moscow. If you hear me, please keep push to talk button on. 45, 30 meters burn. 3 seconds. 12, 16 and a half, and 150. 1 minute and 30 seconds now. 40 meters. 1 minute, 41 meters, 0.45 load.
Soyuz Commander Oleg Novitsky reporting the progress of the deorbit burn to flight controllers at the Russian Mission Control Center in Korolyov.
And 16.5 for propellant.
Отработали 2 минуты.
2 minutes, acceleration 0.46, 54 meters, nominal propellant use, 3 seconds, bias 13.5.
About 10 seconds after the completion of the deorbit burn, the upper section of the Soyuz, known as the orbital module, will be automatically depressurized. This is the first step on the road to the pyrotechnic separation of the modules that will take place shortly before the Soyuz descent module, in which the crew is strapped in, begins to enter the Earth's atmosphere.
7 meters, bias 4 seconds, 12.8, pressure bottle 124, 16.5 for propellant.
Отработали 2.
252, 77.8, bias 4.
Минуты 94 метра должно быть.
94 minutes, 94 meters, should be 4 minutes. 5 seconds difference, delta.
Отработали 3,5.
3.5 minutes, 0.47 acceleration, 96 meters burn, 4 seconds delta, 12.8, and for propellant 16.9, and pressure button 108.
Отработали
4 minutes, 109 meters, 0.47 acceleration, nominal propellant use, difference 4 seconds, 12.9, pressure button 99, 16.8 propellant, and we're getting ready for the activation of thruster.
Отработали 4.
430.47 acceleration, 125 meters.
Так, есть отключение.
Deactivation of thruster.
Есть отключение.
Copy.
Подключение термометра.
Thermal sensors off.
Есть открытие.
SDBO opening.
Есть разделение.
Separation PGT.
Есть, отлично.
Perfect.
Третий. Это не третий, это четвертый.
It's the fourth.
Это параметр.
Parameters are in.
У нас третий был по разделению ПГТ. А сначала
This
было
third one is PGT pressure on IPA falling.
This is Mission Control Houston. The deorbit burn is complete, and the reports from the Russian Mission Control Center are that it was a nominal burn. Kevin Ford, Oleg Novitsky, and Yevgeny Tarelkin are on their way home.
Sensors on.
We're now receiving
Open 350 in the orbit.
reports from the field that an influx of low clouds now is beginning to move in toward the landing site. That is causing some deteriorating visibility at the landing site. Helicopters that had been deployed earlier from Kustanai en route to the landing site have been directed to return to the staging city of Kustanai.
Checking.
Please confirm that the
Personnel are on their way to the landing site via ground transportation. That would be in the form of all-terrain vehicles. So we'll be standing by for additional information on the disposition of recovery forces to get to the crew.
200 in the orbital below. stable in the
Again, earlier throughout the day, the weather was clear in the vicinity of the landing site to the northeast of the town of Arkalyk, but some lingering low clouds associated with the passage of a frontal system and a low pressure system and a cold front that prevented landing 24 hours ago. Some of those clouds have been reintroduced toward the landing site. You're looking at some radar imagery, and as a result, the Russian Search and Recovery Forces, Rosaviatsia, is amending the deployment of its helicopters on the fly here. So we'll stand by for further word on exactly how many helicopters will arrive at the landing site and the disposition of ground transportation that will be waiting for the crew to arrive once it lands just 45 minutes from now. The Soyuz is on its way home. Everything is in excellent shape with the vehicle itself. All systems reported to be in great shape. Soyuz Commander Oleg Novitsky reporting no issues whatsoever, the deorbit burn having been executed in flawless fashion. The next step is about 19 minutes from now. That will be the pyrotechnic separation of the three sections of the Soyuz to enable the descent module, the center section of the Soyuz spacecraft, to make its way towards atmospheric entry, the first traces of the Earth's atmosphere that will occur at an altitude of about 336,000 feet.
Kevin, Intros will be earlier, and after Kupol, we will do it special tightening belt now. Okay. Понимаю.
I understand.
Так, перед 5:33:59.
5:53:59, 12 minutes.
Давление в БУ 30.
35 in the orbital compartment, bow pressure.
Давление в БУ
20 is pressure in the orbital compartment, bow. And defense module stable?
Высота стабильна.
Yes.
70 на левом инфо.
Checking on the left info.
Принято.
Same. Copy.
Жек, подержи еще. Ну, как-то так. Спасибо.
Just like this, thank you.
This is Mission Control Houston. Kevin Ford, Yevgeny Turelkin, and Soyuz Commander Oleg Novitsky at the controls of the Soyuz TMA-06M spacecraft as it heads for the next milestone on the road home to landing in the steppe of Kazakhstan, northeast of the town of Arkalyk. The next milestone to occur about 15 minutes from now. That would be the pyrotechnic separation of the three sections of the Soyuz, the orbital module, the top section, the instrumentation and propulsion module, is the rear section, and in the middle, in the descent module, strapped into their respective seats, is Soyuz Commander Novitsky in the center seat, NASA's Kevin Ford in the right seat, and in the left seat, board engineer Yevgeny Turelkin. The weather, which delayed landing by 24 hours with the passage of a cold front and fog and freezing rain just about 24 hours ago, yielded to clear skies over Kazakhstan, but the weather has been a bit dynamic, and as you can see from this radar, low clouds and fog have formed in the vicinity of the landing site, and as a result, a number of the helicopters that had been deployed from Kustanai were directed to return to the staging city. Some of the helicopters pre-staged in the early morning hours and the wee hours U.S. time on Friday that are now pre-staged in Arkalyk have been instructed to remain on the ground for the time being. Selected personnel, as the reports are indicating, have begun to travel to the landing site via ground transportation. And the latest report from one of the helicopters that is headed out of Kustanai to refuel in Arkalyk for a potential flight onto the landing zone reports thick, low fog with an estimate of visibility of about 100 feet at ground level. So the Russian search and recovery forces, who are masters at this type of operation in all types of weather, are choreographing real-time amendments to the landing plan in the safest and most efficient way possible to reach the crew in the most expedited fashion so that they can begin to extract the crew in the shortest time possible once the Soyuz has touched down. So we'll be standing by to bring you reports as we receive them from the landing site and from the crew itself as it talks ultimately to one of the Antonov fixed-wing aircraft that is flying in the vicinity of the landing site itself, pre-staged at the landing site to act as a command and relay center, if you will, to relay both data and voice communications back to the Russian Mission Control Center outside of Moscow.
13 minutes to separation. Confirming. Just a reminder, please keep reporting in detail. Copy. On all parameters appear on board documentation.
The meteorological combination of the passage of this low-pressure system, actually a series of cold fronts that moved through the steppe of Kazakhstan over the past few days, and the extremely cold temperatures. It is now going on an hour after sunrise. The sun having obviously a tough time making its way to burn off the fog and low clouds because of the dew point that is formed in the vicinity of the landing site. So the search and recovery forces are assessing the weather. They're managing with the helicopter pilots flying those Russian Mi-8 recovery helicopters. They're making real-time calls on the disposition of helicopters and all-terrain vehicles that are being dispatched in order to make it to the landing site for as expeditious an extraction of the crew from the Soyuz vehicle as possible after the Soyuz touches down. Landing scheduled just 36 minutes from now.
Copy. The right input shows 782. It's quite a difference. Yes, it's a fairly big difference.
А на input 2 какое давление?
What's the pressure on input 2? 782.
Принято 782.
Copy 782.
We're about 9 minutes away from the separation of the modules. That will occur at an altitude of 87 miles. Module separation will be followed about 2.5 minutes later by the Soyuz hitting the first traces of the Earth's atmosphere at an altitude of 336,000 feet. At that point, Kevin Ford, Yevgeny Tarelkin, and Oleg Novitsky will feel the first tug of gravity at their bodies in 144 days. You're looking at animation of what ultimately will be the deployment of the drogue and main chutes on the Soyuz vehicle to enable it to descend to its landing site to the northeast of the town of Arkalyk. A few seconds before touchdown, the soft landing engines will fire in a final braking maneuver to cushion the impact of the Soyuz against the ground. The International Space Station is currently crossing the west coast of Africa, moving from southwest to northeast. The Soyuz slightly in front of the International Space Station at this moment as it descends towards entry interface, preceded by the separation of the modules that will occur about 7.5 minutes from now.
Разбейте, можете.
Казбек.
Машина.
Inaudible.
И автоматику закрываем.
Copy. We are closing the helmets. You can close the helmets. Yes, we are closing it.
The closing of the helmets is a routine procedure in advance of the pyrotechnic separation of the three sections of the Soyuz.
Kevin, did you close the helmet? Yes.
And again, communications between the Russian Mission Control Center and the Soyuz always somewhat choppy as it makes its way towards the traces of the Earth's atmosphere. At this hour, the Soyuz TMA-06M and its 3 crewmates passing over northern Africa, soon to pass over the Mediterranean as the Soyuz targets
5 minutes before separation.
its landing site 36 miles to the northeast of Arkelik, a landing site that now appears to be somewhat embedded in fog and low clouds after a clear day in Kazakhstan, a clear evening in Kazakhstan in the overnight hours that were in stark contrast to the fog and freezing rain of 24 hours ago that delayed this landing by a day. The weather conditions and the influx of fog and low clouds over the course of the last 45 minutes to an hour has resulted in some of the search and recovery helicopters either being held in place in the staging town of Arkelik or being requested to turn around from their transit en route from the staging city of Kustanai just across the Russian border to try to avoid as many helicopters flying in reduced visibility as possible. This is not an uncommon practice on the part of the search and recovery forces who evaluate weather right up until the time of the Soyuz touchdown to determine the ultimate disposition of helicopters and ground support transportation to reach the crew in the most expeditious fashion.
Три минуты до рассеяния.
3 minutes before separation.
Повторите, сколько минут до разделения?
Say it again.
3 минуты до разделения.
3 minutes before separation.
Soyuz Commander Oleg Novitsky confirming through flight controllers of the Russian Mission Control Center that we are coming up on the point of the module separation. The orbital module, the top section.
Go ahead, Roman.
Урывками принимаем, но разобрать можно.
We can understand what you're saying with a very small dropout. We have
And, okay.
2 minutes, 40 seconds before separation. Copy.
Is that correct?
Да, в
2:30. Starting with 2:36. Yes, 2:36. Copy.
For
For MLK, 100%. Between 60% and 100% floating, and for parity it's about 40. 40, 50. Okay, copy.
The module separation will be conducted pyrotechnically on automatic computer command.
Program confirmed. Controlled descent confirmed. Copy.
The Soyuz is now more than 200 kilometers away from the International Space Station as it descends toward the Earth's atmosphere. That is beyond the limit of guaranteed space-to-space voice communications through the VHF system relayed through antennas on the International Space Station.
Есть СГ-Разар.
SG-Radar confirmed. Boost-2 confirmed. Copy.
Все тангенты должны быть отжаты.
All PGTs must be released. Transmission buttons
Без фиксатора.
deactivated. We are talking on push-to-talk without restrainer.
Reports from one of the helicopters deployed from Kustanai, the staging city, toward the landing site indicates that they are pressing ahead toward the landing site. Again, it is up to the search and recovery forces to determine which helicopters are able to fly through reduced visibility and which need to turn around toward their landing site. Some of the helicopters may remain on the ground in Arkalyk, and some may press ahead to the landing site. It is not uncommon for the crew to be recovered in an expeditious fashion if visibility or other weather factors prevent all of the helicopters from arriving at the landing site. First and foremost, safety of the crew and the recovery of the crew in the most expeditious fashion.
Suspects Moscow. Казбек, Mission Control Moscow. Казбек, MCC Moscow, how copy? Казбек, Moscow, how copy?
Flight controllers at the Russian Mission Control Center attempting to call the crew on board the Soyuz to confirm module separation.
Казбек, Moscow. Казбек, Moscow.
Once again, a reminder, not at all unusual for no communications
Казбек, Moscow.
between the flight control team in Moscow at the Russian Mission Control Center and the Soyuz spacecraft as it prepares to enter the Earth's atmosphere. This is typical, particularly with the altitude that the International Space Station is currently flying at these days, and the range and the look angle between the Soyuz antennas and the station to relay VHF communications.
Mission Control Moscow, we could copy you, but it's very strong interference. Inaudible. Suspects, Mission Control Moscow, how copy? Suspects, Mission Control Moscow.
The Soyuz at this point has begun its entry into the Earth's atmosphere. One report from the Russian Mission Control Center from snippets of telemetry being received there indicates a normal separation of the Soyuz modules. However, this has not been confirmed by voice from the crew on board the Soyuz.
Kazbek, it's for Moscow.
Kazbek, MCC Moscow.
As the Soyuz continues to make its way toward its landing site northeast of Arkalyk, we're about 20 minutes and 30 seconds away from its expected touchdown time.
Mission Control Moscow.
Again, the communications are expected to improve as the Soyuz approaches the landing site within range of this Antonov fixed-wing aircraft in the proximity of the landing zone itself. Time to touchdown, 19 minutes. The Soyuz well within the Earth's atmosphere as G-forces will begin to build up shortly for Ford, Nowitzki, and Tarelkin. About 3 minutes from now, we should be at the point where the 3 crew members in the descent module will experience maximum G-forces of about 3 to 4 Gs. That will be followed about 2 minutes later by the command to open parachutes. Once again, you're seeing an animation of what would be the final minutes of the Soyuz's descent into the Earth's atmosphere, the deployment of the parachutes, and the final maneuver, a braking rocket maneuver, the soft landing engines firing just seconds before touchdown. The introduction of low clouds and fog into the area over the past hour and a half as an offspring of the fronts that have moved through Kazakhstan over the past few days, and the dew point that's being experienced at the moment with temperatures hovering just over the 0 mark Fahrenheit. All of those meteorological factors
Kazbek, MCC Moscow.
have created a situation where some of the recovery helicopters being deployed from Kustanai were ordered to return to the staging city. Other helicopters much closer to the landing site in the town of Arkalyk are still on the ground, have not been instructed to take off yet. But the report from the search and recovery forces indicates that a minimum and requisite number of helicopters are at the landing site, flying in a circular pattern to await the arrival of the Soyuz spacecraft. These would consist of the most critical personnel to attend to the Soyuz vehicle and its crew members following touchdown. So some of the helicopters are already at the landing site. This is not unusual for only a partial contingent of helicopters to be deployed to create an efficiency and the most expeditious recovery of the crew once the Soyuz has touched down.
Integral 19. The G loads are decreasing 453, roll 0. Integral 18. We are descending per the profile curve. G loads 3.6. Roll minus 45. Integral 16. Marker approaches to the lower edge of the dome.
And through ground sites now, the crew is talking directly to the Russian Mission Control Center, reporting status. Everything is in good shape on board the Soyuz vehicle. G-forces are beginning to decrease as we come up on about a minute away from the command to open the parachutes. Time to touchdown, 15 minutes. So despite some of the weather conditions deteriorating at the landing site, the news is all good from inside the Soyuz spacecraft. The Soyuz right where it's supposed to be. One of the helicopters in which the Director of Human Spaceflight Operations for Russia for NASA, Mike Serber, and NASA Public Affairs Officer Josh Byerly on board. They are over the landing site, so they made it from Kustanai toward the landing site. Again, this is hit and miss when it comes to which helicopters make it and which don't. If the weather conditions don't permit a full contingent of helicopters to make it to the landing site, the most critical personnel are on station, ready to support landing just 14 minutes from now. The search and recovery forces at the landing site have good two-way communications with the crew. We're not hearing it through the VHF communication system at the moment from the Soyuz, but at last communication, all of the communications were in good shape and everything going well as we approach the 13-minute mark toward touchdown. Still awaiting confirmation of the deployment of the parachutes. NASA Public Affairs Officer Josh Byerly has sent an image taken from outside one of the porthole windows on his helicopter. The clouds are fairly thick over the landing site with the sun above that deck of clouds as they circle around the landing site. The report now from the search and recovery forces indicating that the crew is feeling very well as we approach the 12-minute mark to touchdown.
Inaudible.
The Soyuz radio beacon being picked up by the search and recovery forces. That's a very good sign. Everything seems to be in good shape. That radio beacon, along with the Soyuz equipped with global positioning system capability, all of that providing range and position information to the Antonov fixed-wing aircraft and other search and recovery forces assets in the vicinity of the landing site. 10 minutes until touchdown. The Soyuz should be descending under its main parachute. And we are expecting momentarily, if everything is proceeding according to schedule, the jettisoning of the heat shield on the Soyuz. That will expose the altimeter that will provide the Soyuz with altitude information in the final minutes before touchdown. The search and recovery forces now confirming they have a good visual on the descent module. Everything is in good shape. We are less than 10 minutes away from touchdown. The jettisoning of the heat shield also exposes the soft landing engines that will fire just a few seconds off the ground to provide one final braking maneuver and cushion the impact of landing for the 3 crew members who are in the descent module. Oleg Novitsky in the center seat, flanked on his left by Yevgeny Tarelkin, and on his right by NASA's Kevin Ford.
Inaudible. Try one more time.
We are less than 8 minutes away from the expected touchdown of the Soyuz TMA-06M to bring Ford, Novitsky, and Tarelkin home after 144 days in space and a journey of almost 61 million miles. Reports from the search and recovery forces now indicate that the Soyuz is at an altitude of about 3,700 meters, descending on its exact descent profile toward the landing site about 36 miles to the northeast of Arkalyk.
The crew feels good. 2,000 altitude at 15,000. They'll be following you.
2.5 minutes before touchdown, the Soyuz passing through 2,000 meters in altitude. Oleg Novitsky, the Soyuz commander, reporting it feels good.
Interference.
As we wait for further reports relayed through the search and recovery forces, we are approaching the 4-minute mark towards touchdown. Search and recovery helicopters, the most essential helicopters, including the personnel that will be responsible for safing the Soyuz vehicle and extracting the crew, as well as in the erection of the inflatable medical tent nearby the capsule, are on stage. They're on scene. Again,
Preliminary coordination. 446722.
once again, there are fairly thick clouds and quite a bit of ground fog at the landing site. So the search and recovery forces being very cautious and very deliberate in their disposition of the helicopters that are on scene, and which helicopters will be allowed to land to begin the process of extracting the crew once those helicopters are able to land. And the search and recovery forces now indicating that they should be able to land the first wave of helicopters near the descent module in the typical sequential fashion that those helicopters are instructed to touch down so that the critical personnel can begin the process of approaching the vehicle and extracting the crew. If all is going as planned, the Soyuz is about 2 minutes away from touchdown. We're about a minute away from the anticipated touchdown of the Soyuz vehicle on the steppe of Kazakhstan. We'll be standing by for confirmation from the search and recovery forces as to when the touchdown has occurred and whether the Soyuz has landed upright or has been pulled on its side, which is frequently the case. Soyuz now at an altitude of 300 meters. Landing is imminent.
Transmission in process. Copy you. Not seeing you yet.
Standing by for confirmation of touchdown.
degrees coordinates. Inaudible. You have the coordinates. It's 45, 67, 20. Visibility 500.
По нашим данным получается 45, 60 секунд.
45, 67, 20 coordinates.
Наблюдаешь что? Наблюдаю.
Yes, I monitor.
Once again, we're standing by for official confirmation of touchdown from the search and recovery forces in the area just to the northeast of the town of Arkelik on the steppe of Kazakhstan.
Checking zone 4. $682. Tell the position of the object. We are not observing the object. It's foggy. We cannot see anything. No, we have not found the object yet. Okay.
And the words on the front screen of the Russian Mission Control Center say it all. In Cyrillic, that's the Russian for Jest Posadka, they've landed. Expedition 34 is back home on Earth, landing occurring. We don't have an official touchdown time yet, or an unofficial touchdown time. We'll work on that to get that for you shortly. But Kevin Ford, Oleg Novitsky, and Yevgeny Tarelkin are back home, having landed just a few moments ago on the steppe of Kazakhstan.
Can you hear cosmonauts?
We'll wait to see whether the Soyuz landed upright or on its side. But the more important issue is Soyuz is back on Earth with its 3 crew members.
Inaudible.
Go ahead. Yes, Roman. We have found out that the guys have landed. Excellent. Yes. A little later, we will learn the details. Therefore, I would like to give you a go to reconfigure the COM configuration. Okay, I copy and work. Sounds good. And also, Roman, we need to talk about the results of today's activity. So let's find a good time when you want to do this. Okay, let me finish the reconfig, and then I will call you.
Once again, the Soyuz landed to the northeast of the town of Arkalyk a few moments ago. We're still trying to verify an unofficial touchdown time for you. Communications were quite choppy on the way down, as is typically the case. But the Soyuz landed. That was confirmed by the search and recovery forces. We're waiting for additional information. A reduced number of search and recovery helicopters are on scene at the landing site due to fog and low clouds and somewhat hampered visibility that developed over the course of the last 2 hours prior to touchdown. But the Soyuz has landed, wrapping up 144 days in space for Kevin Ford, Oleg Novitsky, and Yevgeny Tarelkin. while we await further information, just to recap, the Soyuz TMA-06M spacecraft with Kevin Ford, Oleg Novitsky, and Yevgeny Turelkin has landed to the northeast of Arkalyk. We are trying to verify an unofficial touchdown time for you. The touchdown occurring about 5 minutes or so ago. That landing confirmed by the search and recovery forces under reduced visibility at the landing site to the northeast of the town of Arkalyk. The deorbit burn and all of the events. The deorbit burn and all of the events during the entry timeline were executed flawlessly. The Soyuz in good shape. Communications, as is typically the case, were choppy at times, hampered, of course, by the distance between the International Space Station and the Soyuz vehicle. Search and recovery forces began a dialogue with the crew just a few minutes before touchdown to provide status reports back to the Russian Mission Control Center in Korolyov outside of Moscow. You're looking at a live view of the ISS flight control room for the Russian Mission Control Center. And the words, yes to Posadka, they've landed on the front board, as is traditional at the moment of touchdown for the Soyuz.
This is a television team. Com checks.
You're hearing some of the reports relayed by the search and recovery forces through an interpreter that some of the ground-based personnel that are in all-terrain vehicles are about 10 minutes away from the spacecraft. Several search and recovery helicopters were flying in the vicinity of the landing zone, made visual contact with the Soyuz and voice contact with the crew, and we're still awaiting word on the disposition of those helicopters to land in close proximity to the spacecraft, as is typically the case, to begin the safing of the vehicle and the extraction of the crew. One report just received here at Mission Control in Houston from NASA Public Affairs Officer Josh Byerly is that the helicopter that he and Mike Serber, the Director of Human Spaceflight Operations in Russia, that helicopter that they were on that flew this morning from Kustanai, the prime staging city just across the Russian border in northern Kazakhstan, to the landing site, was not permitted to land at the landing site because of reduced visibility, and so they are turning around and heading back to Kustanai as we speak. Once again, indicative of some of the challenges being faced by the search and recovery forces to deploy the most essential personnel to attend to the crew and the extraction of the crew from the Soyuz vehicle that landed approximately 10 or so minutes ago. We're still awaiting an unofficial touchdown time. Again, some of the search and recovery forces in all-terrain vehicles are approaching the spacecraft by ground, obviously. They reported just a couple of minutes ago that they were 10 kilometers from the landing zone, traveling at about 1 kilometer per minute. So within the next several minutes, we should be receiving more information as those search and recovery forces approach the vehicle. So as we await further information, once again, the Soyuz is back on Earth with its 3 crew members. We're still awaiting an unofficial landing time. We are estimating that the touchdown occurred around 10 or so p.m. Central Time, perhaps a minute or two earlier. Difficult to ascertain that because of broken communications during the final minutes of descent. The weather in the landing area consisted of low clouds and fog at the time of touchdown. That reduced visibility hampered the opportunity for all of the 12 Russian Mi-8 helicopters associated with this landing operation tonight from reaching the landing site. Only the most critical personnel are in proximity to the Soyuz spacecraft for the most efficient and expeditious recovery of the crew. So we'll be standing by for further information as we go along here and pass it on to you as information is made available to us. Reports received here at Mission Control indicate that the current thinking is that 2 of the search and recovery helicopters will be attempting to land near the Soyuz vehicle in what has become somewhat of a challenging visibility . Again, the weather over the past 2 hours deteriorated somewhat on the steppe of Kazakhstan with temperatures just above 0 Fahrenheit. And the introduction of fog and rather thick clouds in the vicinity of the landing site, some 36 miles to the northeast of Arkalyk, that has delayed the arrival of the most critical search and recovery personnel to begin the process of safing the Soyuz vehicle and extracting the crew. We're now hearing that the first of the search and recovery helicopters is now making a slow descent to land in the vicinity of the Soyuz spacecraft. So once again, we'll offer the thought that on many of the Soyuz landings where weather is a bit dicey, in some of these Soyuz landings where the weather can be challenging, the search and recovery forces, they're experts at the recovery of these crews and the Soyuz spacecraft in all types of weather. Arctic conditions, low clouds, zero visibility, high winds. The weather on this occasion, which had turned very clear during the overnight hours of Saturday morning in Kazakhstan, deteriorated somewhat in the last 2 hours, and although it did not hamper the safe touchdown of the Soyuz, it is delaying by just a few minutes the disposition of the landing of the most critical search and recovery helicopters nearby the spacecraft to begin the process of extracting the crew. We are also still waiting for an unofficial touchdown time for the Soyuz. That has not yet been received. We believe the landing occurred in the neighborhood of about 10:10 p.m. Central Time, but we have not received any confirmation, either official or unofficial, of a precise landing time, nor do we know yet whether the Soyuz landed upright or on its side. And now the report received here in Mission Control in Houston is that the Soyuz TMA-06M, hardy to the end, landed upright in its vertical position at the landing site to the northeast of Arkalyk, and that search and recovery helicopters are beginning to land ever so slowly to begin to approach, for its personnel to begin to approach the Soyuz spacecraft. So the Soyuz landed upright. That will certainly expedite the extraction of the crew. The typical pattern of extracting a crew from a Soyuz that has landed upright is to erect a small stand and a ladder along the side of the Soyuz, open the top hatch of the vehicle, and begin to extract the crew one by one. The Soyuz commander, Oleg Novitsky, would be the first to be extracted from the vehicle to permit his two crewmates on either side of him, Yevgeny Tarelkin on the left and Kevin Ford on the right, then to be extracted thereafter. So we'll be standing by for further information, but the Soyuz vehicle did land vertically upright at its landing site in a rather reduced visibility with clouds and fog hampering the ability of all of the Russian Mi-8 helicopters to make it to the scene. The other report we have received is that Soyuz commander Oleg Novitsky reported to the search and recovery forces that the crew is feeling good. So everything seems to be in order despite the reduced visibility at the landing site, and we'll we'll stay with you until we have further word and the disposition of the crew. And we'll see how the search and recovery forces intend to play out the return of the crew to the staging city of Kustanai. Now, receiving reports that 2 search and recovery helicopters have landed near the Soyuz TMA-06M capsule. So that's good news. The personnel on the ground, they will begin the process of beginning to extract the crew. Not sure yet whether or not the inflatable medical tent will be erected or whether there'll be an expedited return of the crew in those 2 search and recovery helicopters in their suits. That is not uncommon for a crew to be returned in their suits without those suits being removed in favor of more comfortable clothing. It is quite cold at the landing site today. It is Saturday morning in Kazakhstan, now about 9:31 in the morning, Saturday morning in Kazakhstan. 2 years ago, Scott Kelly and his crewmates landed in quite a bit of snow. It was a clear day at the landing site, but the winds were blowing at about 35 to 40 knots, creating almost blizzard-like conditions, even though the sun was out on that particular morning. The crew at that time did not go into the medical tent. They were loaded directly into the search and recovery helicopters and were flown back to the staging city of Kustanai for the trip back to their respective homes. This is Mission Control Houston. The initial coordinates of the landing site received by ballistics officers in Mission Control indicate that the Soyuz landed just about right at the bullseye target that it was intended to land at, just a couple of seconds off in the lat-long coordinates. So the Soyuz, despite the reduced visibility, which is immaterial for the Soyuz on its descent, landed just about exactly where it was intended to based on the landing and entry timeline profile that the Soyuz computers and the guided entry brought the Soyuz to for a landing upright on the steppe of Kazakhstan to the northeast of the town of Arkalyk. So having accomplished an almost unprecedented amount of scientific research, with a number of visiting vehicles having arrived at the station during its tenure, Expedition 34 is complete as Kevin Ford, Oleg Novitsky, and Yevgeny Tarelkin landed. Their Soyuz landing in a vertical and upright position. We still have not received an unofficial even touchdown time. We are estimating it was about 10:10 p.m. Central Time. And now we're receiving our first video from the landing site. You can see personnel bundled up against the chill of an early Saturday morning on the steppe of Kazakhstan. They have already erected that stand around the Soyuz vehicle that landed upright. We believe the landing occurred about 26 minutes ago, but we don't have an unofficial touchdown time for you. We're estimating about 10:10 p.m. Central Time. The first video from the search and recovery forces, courtesy of the Russian Federal Space Agency at the landing site. You can see the Soyuz descent module upright as the search and recovery forces and RSC Energia personnel begin the process of opening the top hatch along with the extraction of the crew. The first out should be the Soyuz commander from the center seat, that being Oleg Novitsky, followed by either Yevgeny Tarelkin or Kevin Ford. We'll see how that plays out. The Soyuz landing in good shape after a flawless entry back into the Earth's atmosphere. As the events unfolded throughout the course of the afternoon and the evening, the deorbit burn occurring on time, all of the entry milestones occurring without incident, and the touchdown occurring, as we said, some 27 or so minutes ago, with the Soyuz landing upright. That will assist the search and recovery personnel in the extraction of the crew.
We're opening the hatch.
This is Mission Control Houston. Again, video from the landing site. This is live. You're looking at search and recovery personnel and RSC Energia technicians as they begin the process of opening the top hatch of the Soyuz vehicle to extract the crew. The landing of the Soyuz in an upright position occurring about 29 minutes ago. We do not have an unofficial touchdown time. We're estimating that the touchdown occurred about 10:10 p.m. Central Time. That is just a wag at this point. But you can see how fog and low clouds and almost zero visibility descended upon the landing site after a low pressure system and a cold front moved through Kazakhstan, creating clear skies during the overnight hours on Friday for Kazakhstan into Saturday morning. Over the course of the last 2.5 hours, those conditions deteriorated, however, obviously due to a fairly dramatic dew point that descended at the landing site. That thwarted the effort of most of the search and recovery helicopters from reaching the landing site. To the best of our information, 2 search and recovery helicopters with the most critical personnel arrived on scene. You can see those personnel attending to the Soyuz vehicle at this moment.
Дадим поток, планшет. Все отдадим. Какая энергия отдаст планшет? Володя, осторожно, нос в груди. Нос, Олег, осторожно, слева. Нос, слева. Еще ниже. Вот.
Ефимович. ВМки так и не подошли, да?
ВМки далеко еще.
Далеко, да?
Снег тяжелый.
Вот вроде и снег-то не глубокий, да?
Отсюда.
Да. Она... На пузо она не сядет.
Нет, на пузо она не сядет.
Да, он небольшой.
Тяжелый снег.
Не, ну правильно, эта машина приезжает всегда.
Это вообще от машины вниз надо.
Тем более мы это все срочный груз не пройдем на 12.
Отсюда эти спрашивают?
Срочный груз на 12, да?
Успеем.
Когда вы приедете? Ну мы дождаться будем.
Вы тоже дожидаетесь?
Да.
Мы как заберем их?
Будем дождаться. Никто не знает. Ну это когда было обледенение. Я помню это.
Информация командира? Да. Все? Дайте. Володя! Валюта! Здесь что доставать будет, да?
Самое главное, их не поморозить.
Это в контейнере.
Сейчас кресла физически не будет. Да. Кстати, Света моя, давайте.
Ты что эфир-то забиваешь, Аля?
Operating in very dismal weather at the landing site with temperatures hovering around the 5 to 10 degree Fahrenheit mark. The search and recovery forces and the RSC Energia personnel now working to open the top hatch of the Soyuz vehicle. The Soyuz landing upright, the stand, as it is called, placed around the top of the descent module. This is equipped with a slide that you can see on the right side of this stand that will enable the crew members, once extracted, to be carefully helped down to the surface, where all terrain vehicles you can see in the background are standing by. We're waiting to hear further information as to how the crew will be dispositioned, whether there will be an opportunity for them to sit for a while in reclining chairs, or whether or not they'll be brought immediately to these helicopters that did make it on the ground for an expedited flight back to Kustanai. And now we're looking at the first of the crew members being extracted from the vehicle. We believe that that is should be the Soyuz commander Oleg Novitsky.
Ефимыч, уйди с экрана, а? Голову!
Just be careful.
Ефимыч! Так, на центр! Голову на центр! Давай мы прикроем люк. Я прикрою люк, попробуй сам.
It is 9:44 on a Saturday morning at the landing site to the northeast of the town of Arkalyk. The first of the three Expedition 34 crew members has been extracted from the top of the Soyuz vehicle and helped down that slide. Personnel now working to extract the second of the three crew members.
Спокойно, не торопись.
Блин, не вижу. Пробивает.
Открывай, давай. Вот, голову аккуратно. Не, руки убери. Убери руку.
Серега, молодец. Там готово все. Застелено все, да? Может быть, еще вертолет. Сейчас я не знаю.
Молодец, умница, very good. Good boy. Вставай на крест.
Около С2 готовимся. Так.
6 минут. Голову. Поехали. Витя. Отпускаем. Голову. Так, и вот сюда быстрее.
Let's put him here.
Это как будешь готов, Жека. Говори.
Володь, данные по медицине.
Так, готов данные по командиру. Мешок вот, я тебе могу дать, сразу здесь. Мешок вот, я тебе сразу могу дать. Не торопись.
And you're looking at Kevin Ford, the Expedition 34 commander, who was the second crew member to be extracted from the Soyuz vehicle, being bundled up against the extreme frigid temperatures on a Saturday morning at the landing site. To Ford's right is Soyuz commander Oleg Novitsky. Yevgeny Tarelkin will be the final crew member to be extracted from the vehicle. Kevin Ford completing his second flight into space and a total of 158 days in space on his two missions. The first as pilot of the shuttle Discovery on the STS-128 mission that flew in August and September of 2009, a 14-day flight of assembly and logistics at the International Space Station. Ford, Novitsky, and Tarelkin launched on October 23rd of last year from Site 31 at the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan, arriving at the International Space Station for a docking at the Poisk module on October 25th. And Yevgeny Tarelkin now out. All of the crew members have been extracted from the Soyuz vehicle.
Take care of your head. Slide down.
Все, готов перейти на точку перед экватором.
Russian search and recovery forces attending to the crew members. There's a thumbs up signal from Tarelkin. Russian nurses also on scene to conduct some very preliminary medical checks of the crew, but all three crew members certainly appeared to be smiling and in good spirits as they were all the way through their increment of almost 5 months in space.
Let's take his pulse.
Звук идет, нет? Все понял, хорошо. Да мы сейчас спросим. Ребят, у вас сейчас в прямом эфире идет в СУПе.
We are showing you live in the MCC.
Для них можно сказать?
Can you say a couple of words for them? Because everyone was worrying about you.
В СУПе вас видят в прямом.
At the MCC, they can see you live right now. Please say something. Just a couple of words. We would like to repeat it once again.
Вот сейчас, да?
Right now? Soon. Give us 1 week.
Once again, all three crew members out of the Soyuz vehicle being attended to. We're still waiting to hear further word on where they go from here. We do not know at this point whether the personnel, enough personnel, were able to land to erect an inflatable medical tent, or whether the crew simply will move on to be brought into the available search and recovery helicopters that are on the ground at the landing site for an expedited return to the staging city of Kustanai. We still do not have an unofficial touchdown time for the Soyuz. Based on the voice calls that we received, we can only speculate that the touchdown time was around 10:08 to 10:10 p.m. Central Time. That's the best information we have at this point. And so after a few minutes in a reclining chair to begin an acclimation to Earth's gravity, Oleg Novitsky, the Soyuz commander, begins to be brought, and it appears as if he will be brought towards one of the helicopters that landed for an expedited return to Kustanai. Kevin Ford now being bundled up and being hoisted to be brought, we believe, to one of those helicopters that were able to land on the ground, and Tarelkin now will follow in suit.
Will you carry, Evgeny? Yes, I will. Good girl.
So the search and recovery forces operating with dispatch, wasting little time against the inclement weather conditions at the landing site that deteriorated over the past 2 or 3 hours, bringing the crew members to helicopters. We don't believe that the requisite number of helicopters landed to erect the inflatable medical tent near the spacecraft. And as you can see from this view, it appears as if the crew is being brought to the available helicopters for an expedited return to Kustanai.
Сереж, делай это самое Малясова в эфир. Владимир Александрович.
Да куда ты пошел? Расскажите. Расскажите.
О чем? Что вы хотите, чтобы я рассказал?
Как?
Так, да?
So to recap, it was all by the numbers this evening as the Soyuz undocked on time from the Poisk module of the International Space Station at 6:43 p.m. Central Time, executed a separation burn to begin phasing away from the station, at which point just over 2 hours later, 2.5 hours later, executed its deorbit burn at 9:13 p.m. Central Time and began the descent back toward Earth. All of the entry milestones were executed without an issue, and the only problem this evening, Saturday morning Kazakhstan time, was the weather that closed in on the landing site rather quickly and rather dramatically. That resulted in only 2 search and recovery helicopters and a series of all-terrain vehicles arriving at the landing site to attend to the crew instead of the usual dozen helicopters and a bevy of onlookers and personnel that normally would be present at the landing site. The crew, as you can see from the Soyuz vehicle that landed upright, the crew was extracted within minutes after the helicopters arriving at the landing site. They spent a few minutes in reclining chairs and were hoisted and brought to those respective helicopters, we presume, for an expedited return to the staging city of Kustanai in northern Kazakhstan, just across the border from Russia. We have not received an unofficial touchdown time. We can only speculate that it was around 10:08 p.m. or so Central Time. We can't verify anything more specific than that at this point. Communications were fairly choppy at the time of touchdown. All we know is that the Soyuz, obviously, as you can see from this live view, was in an upright state as it landed, and the crew members appear to be in good shape as they are being brought to the helicopters to take off for the trip, a 2-hour flight back to the staging city of Kustanai. We are speculating that they'll be brought to Kustanai. It is entirely possible that because of the visibility, they could be flown to an interim stop in Arkalyk, which is nearby, only about 36 miles away. No information yet on where the crew will be brought to. There's a NASA plane at the airport in Kustanai. There is a Gagarin cosmonaut training center aircraft also in Kustanai, where the crews are normally brought back to be dispatched back home. But because of the weather today, we're only speculating that Kustanai is the initial destination for the crew. It could very well be that they're diverted to Arkalyk, so we'll be standing by for further information about that. And even as this recovery operation continues on the steppe of Kazakhstan to the northeast of Arkalyk, further to the northwest, back in Russia at Star City at the Gagarin Cosmonaut Training Center, the next trio of crew members to be launched to the International Space Station, Pavel Vinogradov, Alexander Mazurkin, and Chris Cassidy of NASA, are preparing to depart Star City to fly down to the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan for the final 2 weeks of training that will lead to their launch in the wee hours of March 29th Kazakhstan time, the afternoon of March 28th U.S. time here in Houston, to join up with their crewmates on what will be a single-day launch to docking, a 4-orbit 6-hour transit from the launch pad at Baikonur to the International Space Station. This is Mission Control. This is Mission Control, Houston. This is Mission Control, Houston. This is a replay, a video shot inside one of the search and recovery helicopters of the descent of the Soyuz vehicle toward its landing site. Below, you can see the thick clouds and the fog that hindered the landing of all of the search and recovery helicopters. To the best of our knowledge, only 2 of those helicopters actually landed to expedite the extraction of the crew, which those crew members are being loaded back onto the search and recovery helicopters to depart the landing site for what we believe will be Kustanay, Kazakhstan, the prime staging city, but we do not have that confirmed. Again, this video showing the Soyuz descending under the parachute, disappearing into the thick clouds where it landed, just about right on target at what we believe was a landing time almost an hour ago of about 10:08 p.m. Central Time, although we have not received any confirmation of either an unofficial or official landing time. Again, this is a replay of video shot from inside one of the search and recovery helicopters that did in fact make it down to the landing site. There are a dozen such helicopters comprising the search and recovery forces. To the best of our knowledge, only 2 of those helicopters actually landed, and you're seeing a video replay of the Soyuz having landed upright. That helped to expedite the extraction of the crew. The 2 search and recovery helicopters that did make it down in rather dismal visibility on this Saturday morning in Kazakhstan to the northeast of the town of Arkalyk quickly established a foothold, putting a stand around the Soyuz vehicle. You can see it being rotated a bit in this replay of the video of the post-landing activities of just under an hour ago. The crew was extracted with Oleg Novitsky first out, followed by Kevin Ford and then Yevgeny Tarelkin. They were placed in reclining chairs for just a few minutes. The biting cold of this freezing, sub-freezing condition that obviously introduced fog and low clouds at the landing site, temperatures in the low teens at best at the landing site, resulted in the crew undergoing an expedited extraction and no inflatable medical tent nearby, and being brought to those 2 helicopters to take off for a unknown destination at this point. We can only speculate it would either be Kustanay or nearby Arkalyk, where we'll be standing by for further information on that. Again, this is a video replay of activities that took place within the past hour as the most critical search and recovery personnel from the Rosaviatsa search and recovery forces attended to the Expedition 34 crew in the Soyuz capsule that landed, we believe, at approximately 10:08 p.m. Central Time. We simply cannot get a more accurate time than that. We just inquired once again at the Russian Mission Control Center outside of Moscow, and still no unofficial time of touchdown, but we are speculating that that touchdown occurred somewhere in the neighborhood of about 10:08 or so Central Time, 9:08 or so Kazakhstan time on Saturday morning. The Soyuz landed upright. You see the hardware associated with the stand that was erected around the spacecraft to help extract the crew and get them down to the ground, where they were put in reclining chairs for just a few minutes before being carried in those chairs to the two nearby waiting helicopters that did in fact make it to the ground. The search and recovery helicopters that did land were accompanied by a series of all-terrain vehicles that in part provided the television uplink for the video that we saw in real time about an hour ago of the extraction of the spacecraft, and that you're seeing right now. This is real-time video. You're seeing some of the all-terrain vehicles that accompanied the recovery of the crew within the past hour.
Этапах полета у нас нет. Все в порядке. Штатно.
Everything is good. Everything was nominal. Are there any other questions? If there are no other questions, then this completes our press conference.
This is Mission Control Houston. We are receiving reports from the Russian Mission Control Center outside of Moscow that Russian Space Agency officials are indicating that the crew members of Expedition 34, Oleg Novitsky, the Soyuz commander, Yevgeny Tarelkin, and NASA's Kevin Ford are likely to be flown back in the search and recovery helicopters they were loaded into a short time ago, back to the staging city of Kustanai, expediting their return to board respective aircraft. A NASA plane that will carry Kevin Ford back to Houston, and a Gagarin Cosmonaut Training Center aircraft that will carry Novitsky and Tarelkin back to Chkalovsky Airfield, the military base just outside of their training center in Star City, Russia. So with that, we'll recap by indicating to you that our best estimate of a landing time for the Soyuz in a fog-shrouded snowy steppe in Kazakhstan. We are estimating that the landing was at around 10:08 p.m. Central Time, 9:08 a.m. Kazakhstan time, but that is a very, very rough and unofficial time. We simply cannot get a more accurate time from the officials supervising the search and recovery operations at this point. The more important issue was that the Soyuz landed upright, that the crew was quickly extracted and placed in reclining chairs just outside of the spacecraft in excellent shape, in good shape, smiling, signaling thumbs up as they began to acclimate themselves to a gravity environment after almost 5 months in space. They were carried in those reclining chairs to 2 nearby search and recovery helicopters that were able to land at the landing site initially with the most critical personnel to expedite the removal of the crew from the Soyuz. And the reports that we're now receiving from the Russian Mission Control Center are that the crew will be flown back to Kustanai, Kazakhstan, the prime staging city, about a 2-hour helicopter ride from the landing site back to Kustanai, where they will be dispositioned to board their respective aircraft for the flights back home. So the almost 5 months for Expedition 34 crew members, Kevin Ford, Oleg Novitsky, and Yevgeny Tarelkin, that began with their launch as part of the Expedition 33 crew under the command of Sonny Williams, who was on board the station at that time back on October 23rd. Ford, Novitsky, and Tarelkin reached the International Space Station 2 days later, docking with the Poisk module on the space-facing side of the Russian segment of the International Space Station on October 25th. They spent 144 days on board, 144 days in space, 142 days on board the International Space Station, logging 2,304 orbits of the Earth, almost 61 million miles of travel in an adventure that ended with their safe landing on the steppe of Kazakhstan, we believe at around 10:08 p.m. Central Time this evening, 9:08 a.m. Kazakhstan time on Saturday morning. The crew is safe. They appear to be in good shape, being flown back to Kustanai, Kazakhstan for the trip back to Houston and back to Star City, Russia. So with that, we'll wrap up our day-long coverage of the return of the Expedition 34 crew that ended with a safe landing of Kevin Ford, Oleg Novitsky, and Yevgeny Tarelkin. That's it from here in Houston. We'll wrap it up and remind you that we'll be back on the air on Monday morning with the ISS Update Hour, that commentary hour to air on NASA television at 10 a.m. Central Time, 11 a.m. Eastern Time. There will be a series of video files in the early morning hours on Saturday, and again on Saturday afternoon. We would urge you to consult the latest information on the NASA website at www.nasa.gov/station for all the latest information regarding the return of the Expedition 34 crew. Ford, Novitsky, Tarelkin back on Earth, safe and sound after almost 5 months in space. With that, we bid you a good weekend and a good evening. This is Mission Control Houston.